land banks. They are a fairly new phenomenon, at least I would say over the last 30 or 40 years, but they're the result of an ongoing problem that I think existed for a long time. And that was, for the longest time, counties had a problem trying to draw enough investors out to their sales to get all their properties sold. And even when they could, a lot of counties had properties that were with more taxes that were owed on them than they may have been worth. And sometimes properties just don't sell. On top of that, counties get all kinds of properties. People pass away. Sometimes you have to improve properties and homes. It's really just more work than the county could ever handle, especially in your big cities. In some of your big cities, counties were absolutely just swamped with work trying to manage over their properties. And as a result, properties were suffering and they were having a hard time doing the job. That's where land banks came in. Basically, what counties did was they created a nonprofit that they could hand over some of those controls to. They could help them, acquire, hold, manage, and even redevelop properties in the area, and to do so for the benefit of the local community. And so the whole idea here is to take properties and put them back into productive use, with a new owner, and for all of this to kind of help the community, beautify the community, fix the community in a lot of ways. So they're good programs, in a sense. They're all about trying to help the locals and help manage the inventory. But what it means for us as investors is that a lot of the opportunities that exist are going to exist there, in some of these land banks, whereas in the past they may have been in over-the-counter lists. Today they're in land banks.
Yeah, in fact, and kind of looking at the history, like Shade said, they've really kind of been popping up in the last 10 or 15 years. I looked to see when was the very first land bank, and it looked like there was a few of them that started in the 30 that was kind of a way to provide cheap land and housing, but really we haven't seen them until more recently. And like Shade talked about, really the purpose for them is to put properties that are, essentially right now a liability, and make them something positive where they can start getting used again, but more importantly, they can start getting property taxes again and have somebody that's actually caring for the property, because in some of these areas, these homes were turning into areas of crime, vagrants, different things like that, where people were in them. And so it just helped the community be able to do something with them so that they don't all turn into potential fire hazards.
Yeah, the main way they get properties is just through the tax sale and through properties that aren't purchased. That's the number one way that they end up acquiring property. But they can also end up, anything that is basically city or county held is something that they can have purview over. So, or donations from the public. That's also something that you can find. But in any case, the one thing they do act as is another gatekeeper. So the establishment of land banks basically requires, not just the cooperation of governments around there, but also they have to have it approved at the state level. But what it means for us is that they end up kind of setting the rules for what needs to be done for a purchase, or what a property's selling price is going to be, or if there's any stipulations or things you have to agree to when you go to buy a property. So it also means that the rules vary by state. Every time you go into a land bank, they're probably going to have their own set of rules here that they have, or things that they want you to go by. And it invariably, they are originally meant to provide services for the local individual first, and then for somebody that's out of state after that. So if you happen to live in an area where a land bank operates, it's worth taking a look to see if they have anything that that could potentially work as an investment, because you can probably get a better price on something, or others outside the area may not even be eligible to buy the properties. So you can basically buy from, as a small group of people that are, that are entitled to the inventory. We've seen that in cases before, but there are enough land banks that are out there. It's worth checking to see if there's one in your individual area, just because so many of them have popped up, and so many of them now have inventory that they're selling. That's where a lot of the over-the-counter inventory has gone over the last 15 years.
Yeah, well, and really, every land bank is going to be completely different with what they're going to require that needs to be done, what type of properties are available. They offer all types of properties. We've seen land, we've seen lots, we've seen, obviously homes. Yeah, we've seen commercial property, but it's going to depend on how many properties they have in that area and kind of what their rules are, if that's an area we want to invest in or not. So it's important as we look at these different land banks to see exactly what their rules are. It can be worth giving them a quick call. They're usually pretty happy to help. That's the one thing about the land banks, is they're a little bit different than the county, because when you're contacting them, it's kind of their job to help sell these properties. And so many times they're going to be a lot, many of them are willing to work with you, and it can help you with whatever the rules they have set up. But like I mentioned, you can find all different types of real estate within these different land banks.
Yeah, a lot of them have a lot of homes, and that's kind of what they are helping to manage, is to make sure the homes aren't getting ruined. And it can be a benefit in a lot of ways, because what they do differently from the county is they basically will go inside the property if the county hasn't done that yet, and they'll get evaluations, they'll get estimates done on certain work that needs to be done on the property in some cases. They'll get images of the property that maybe the county didn't have before. They can provide us with a lot of information and details that the county wasn't really providing because they didn't have enough time to do it. So yeah, there's at least 250 land banks in the United States, and they're growing all the time. And some of these land banks have over 1,000 properties in them. Some of them probably have several thousand properties, in them that are available in one way or another. And so, you should check to see what kind of inventory land banks in your area have. In most states, I can't think of a state that doesn't have land banks here. There may be some state out there, but the majority of states have set up land banks now to kind of help the counties manage over some of that county-held land that they have. And so you can download a list of those and kind of go through those, and also see whatever the requirements are. In fact, a lot of them have online maps that are set up with their properties laid out, across the city, so you can see which properties are available, which properties they've sold before, which properties are deals in the past, or basically which properties are under contract. You can essentially see. So yeah, lots of different kinds of land banks here. Here's an example of one for the Central Illinois Land Bank Authority. And usually what you're looking for here is anything that's going to let you see what their inventory is, view our properties, which if we click on right there, it would pull up this list like this, where we can see kind of a list of properties that they have. And these are all homes that we're looking at right here. And so they have links, they have the full property address and which city or village, these properties lie in. And you can see it's not a huge number. They have like 6 houses here right now, but with these houses they probably have quite a bit of information on them.
Yeah, this is an example of a smaller land bank. Some are only going to have a limited number of properties. Others, in this case, you can see, had, what is that number down there? 2,400. And so this was a collection of different land banks that have put their properties here within the State Land Bank Authority. But you can go to some of these areas where there's lots of different land for sale. In fact, we've had students that have just picked up land and land banked, and then turn around and flipped it on eBay for 500 to 1,000% return. So we can find all different types of property, land and and homes in some of these different areas.
Yeah, here's an example of in that same area, some of the land bank homes that they have. And you can see they've got images here of the property, of a lot of the details here. These are some of the these are all out of Michigan Land Bank, that one that we were looking at. And yeah, you can see with this one, the property has restricted eligibility until February 1st, 223. Applications will only be reviewed from qualified nonprofit housing development entities. That's interesting. So this one, they need a nonprofit housing developer to come in and to buy up some of theirs. At least that's the rule that they've set on their on these particular properties. So again, it's one of those things that happens when you have another gatekeeper, though, that's involved in the process. They can help in a lot of ways, but also they can also kind of decide which properties can be sold to who and how. And so you can find good deals, though. Not all the counties require nonprofit purchases like this.
No, and in fact, there's many of them that'll even cater to investors and property owners. So it kind of depends on, like Shade said, each one's going to be a little bit different. These are just different examples that are on, one of the Land Bank Authority websites. And you can kind of see a map there of all the properties, and you can click on them individually and pull up and see some more about the details. And at this point, if we were interested in it, would probably take that parcel number and go to the county that's located and do some additional due diligence on it. but this can at least give us a way to kind of quickly see where it's at, close approximation of where the address is at. And then if it looks good from there, that's where we'd go through and do more due diligence.
Yeah, on some of these, what's nice is you can pick out properties based on where they're located at geographically. So we can, if there might be areas within the city or within the county that we're interested in, other parts of the county we're not. This will make it a little bit easier here. In this case, this is a land bank for Albany County in New York. And, they've got about 759 properties, in their land bank here. What's interesting as well with this same land bank is that they also have a lot of homes in it. And in the homes that they have some of these homes being offered up through the real estate market by realtors. And I've told the story before, but we were out there for an auction in New York, and we were viewing other properties that were for sale in the area, and we saw a property that looked kind of rough, but the price on it was pretty good. And I think one of the people at the event was considering buying it. And so when we got a hold of a purchase agreement on it, we realized that it was actually owned by the county, that it was a land bank property. We didn't know that at the time that we were looking at it, but it happened to be a land bank property that they were just kind of showing there on the open market. And so yeah, they're finding all kinds of ways to get properties moving. We see the asking price on this one is about $8,000, which is not that bad. I mean, this one did sell. Yeah, listing comment sold. You can imagine, because it's a fairly clean property. I mean, it had $3,600 in back taxes that were owed, but selling for $8,000, pretty clean house here. So it would make sense as to why somebody would pay it.
Yeah, definitely. Like Shade said, some of these are going to be working with investors, whether they sell that to you, whether they, in that case, they went ahead and listed with an agent. I've seen land banks that list part of the properties with an agent and then sell some directly to investors. Each one is going to be a little bit different. Here's another property that was currently available. They were asking $8,000 for it. It looks like it didn't have any number there as far as closing. But in addition to just being able to see a photo of it, many times, in fact, most of the time, I would say they're going to have detailed information on it. They've already had inspections done on it. Some of them will give you a full printout of what needs to be done. You can get interior photos. You can get walkthroughs. Kind of think of them as a nonprofit real estate sales company. That's what they're trying to do. So if you can work with them, you can pick up properties at the right price. In addition to that, many times you can even get title insurance on these properties. Some of them will have warranty deeds where they've gone through quiet title or at least insure the deed. So, as far as that's concerned, it's kind of like the best of a tax deal investment and the best of regular real estate investment. Is you've kind of got this chance where you can buy these, not directly from the county, but through a nonprofit that takes these county properties and they're interested in selling them. And some of these are doing hundreds of deals a year. They wouldn't be doing hundreds of deals a year. Investors wouldn't be doing those deals if they weren't making good profit on each one of them.
Yeah, well, in fact, it is interesting how we see a lot of these starting to offer things like marketable title, for the property. Like, you can get title insurance or warranty deeds on the properties, or at least making it much easier to get financed on deals. Getting a lot of this stuff done before you buy almost makes it different from a tax sale property in some ways. Just because there are better opportunities. In fact, Greg, Greg is one of the students we have there that has bought several of these land bank properties and has fixed them up and worked with counties, and that's kind of something he said is that they're very good to work with as long as you keep them informed. The counties are great to work with, and he's done it multiple times, and so I would believe him. But it's also important though to understand all of the rules, for the land bank and exactly what you're getting into, what the timeframes are. In fact, what he said about the timeframes that was kind of interesting was that they wanted the work done within a year, but they're actually pretty flexible if you are just in regular communication with them. If they just know what's going on, they generally leave you alone.
Yeah. Now, as far as what they're going to ask, is going to be completely dependent upon that individual land bank. We looked at that last lot. They were offering it for $600. The home they were offering for $8,000. We've seen some where they've offered more. We've even seen some where they'll go ahead and redo the home can through the land bank and then reoffer it that way. So when you're
Yeah.
looking at land banks, you can usually get an idea pretty quickly if this is one that's going to have some opportunity. You can read the rules, you can look at what inventory is available, you can see if they have minimum bid amounts. And so you don't have to spend a huge amount of time to say this one's probably not for me. Let me look for another one.
Yeah, and they do kind of, some of them cater towards home buyers, and some of them cater towards more for lots and things like that. It kind of depends on what you're looking for there, but it's certainly worth the time to check out and see if there are land banks in some of the areas that you're investing in, and certainly areas where you live as well. See if they have land banks in that area, because you might be surprised at what is available and what some of the opportunities are. They're especially a good way for local investors or non-home owners, to get a home or rehab. Like for instance, if you wanted to get a home to buy in the area to fix up, for yourself, it would be a great way to get a property at a very low percentage of value, and to be able to put equity into the property basically as you fix it up. But yeah, there are a lot of properties that can also be ways to pick up properties for deep discounts as well that are in pretty good shape, and to be able to do so with more information than you could normally get from the tax sale.
Yeah, and for any of the people that are members, that all of those land banks are available on the website. In fact, I was going through them even today to see if they've added any more that we can include on our list. So if there is a new one coming up, we're going to keep that information saved right there.